This is exactly what is wrong with the public education system. Look at you! And you drive that hideous 2008 Toyota parked right next to the... It's an eyesore! How am I supposed to trust you? How am I supposed to trust you to educate the next generation? You clearly can't even afford to manage your own life.
The morning air outside Oak Creek Elementary School was crisp, but to Clara Evans, it suddenly felt suffocatingly thin. Standing on the cracked concrete sidewalk, blocking Clara from reaching the front doors of the school, was Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa was 35 years old, drowning in the scent of an imported French perfume that cost more than Clara's monthly rent. She wore a tailored, cream-colored Chanel suit, oversized designer sunglasses, and clutched a pristine white Hermes Birkin bag. Parked illegally in the drop-off zone behind her was a gleaming, brand-new Porsche Cayenne. Vanessa was the wife of a high-powered corporate lawyer, and she wielded her husband's wealth like a blunt weapon, desperate to dominate everyone she considered beneath her. Clara Evans, on the other hand, was 28 years old and completely exhausted. She stood quietly, gripping the straps of a heavy canvas tote bag that was currently filled with 40 boxes of crayons, 6 dozen pencils, and 3 winter coats she had bought at a thrift store. Clara wore a faded gray cardigan over a simple cotton dress. The soles of her flats were indeed worn thin, and her car, the rusted Toyota sitting in the lot, was barely holding on to its transmission. But Clara was not poor because she was a failure. She was poor because she was a public school teacher in America. Clara earned $42,000 a year. But what Vanessa, and the rest of the oblivious world, didn't know was that Clara spent nearly $4,000 of her own miserable salary every single year just to keep her classroom functioning. When the district slashed the budget for art supplies, Clara bought them. When her students came to school shivering because their parents couldn't afford heating bills, Clara bought them jackets. She subsidized the broken American education system with her own blood, sweat, and credit cards. "Mrs. Sterling," Clara replied, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of having to defend her dignity at 7:15 in the morning. "My personal vehicle and my attire do not impact my ability to teach third-grade mathematics. I am simply trying to get into the building to prepare for the day." "Your attire impacts the prestige of this classroom," Vanessa snapped, stepping closer, aggressively invading Clara's personal space. Her diamond rings flashed in the morning sun. "We pay exorbitant property taxes to live in this district. I expect my son to be surrounded by excellence, not charity cases. I am formally requesting a meeting with the principal today. I want my son transferred to a classroom where the teacher actually looks like a professional, not a homeless person who wandered off the street." Vanessa scoffed, turning on her designer heel. "Honestly, they let anyone teach these days. It's pathetic." Vanessa marched back to her illegally parked Porsche, completely convinced of her own absolute supremacy. She believed she had just asserted dominance over a helpless, pathetic woman. She had absolutely no idea that she was being watched. Standing 50 feet away, leaning quietly against the brick wall of the school building, was a man named Marcus. Marcus wore a faded, flannel lumberjack shirt, worn-out denim jeans, and heavy work boots covered in dried mud. He held a simple paper cup of black coffee. He looked like a construction worker waiting for his shift to start. He had just dropped off his son, a quiet, observant boy who happened to be in Clara's class. As Marcus watched Vanessa Sterling humiliate the young teacher, his grip on the paper coffee cup tightened until the cardboard began to crush. Marcus knew exactly what Clara was doing. He recognized the heavy canvas tote bag filled with supplies. 30 years ago, Marcus had been a starving, abused kid from the wrong side of the tracks. He would have ended up dead or in prison if it wasn't for a public school teacher who bought him meals, bought him a winter coat, and told him he was worth something. That teacher had saved his life. And now, Marcus was watching an arrogant, entitled woman viciously mock a teacher for making the exact same sacrifices. Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee. His eyes, sharp and terrifyingly calculating, tracked the license plate of Vanessa's Porsche Cayenne as it sped away from the curb. Vanessa Sterling believed her wealth made her a god. She didn't know that the quiet man in the muddy boots standing by the wall could buy her husband's entire law firm with a single phone call, fire everyone inside it, and burn the building to the ground just for fun. The arrogant mother was about to learn a devastating lesson about the true nature of power, and her fake, designer-wrapped empire was about to be completely pulverized. Before we dive deeper into tonight's story, please take a quick second to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video so you never miss an episode. Also, let us know in the comments, do you think public school teachers are paid enough for the sacrifices they make? We read every single comment. Now, let's return to Clara, a woman who is quietly giving everything she has to a world that gives her nothing in return. At 7:00 p.m. that evening, Clara Evans unlocked the door to her tiny, drafty, one-bedroom apartment. The heater in the living room had been broken for 2 weeks, and she couldn't afford the $200 repair bill. She kept her faded cardigan on as she walked into the cramped kitchen. Her dinner that night, just like the night before, was a 50-cent package of instant chicken noodles. While Vanessa Sterling was likely sitting in a 5-star restaurant complaining about the temperature of her imported wine, Clara was standing over a chipped stove, boiling tap water just to have something warm in her stomach. Clara sat down at her small, wobbly kitchen table and unzipped her worn purse. She pulled out a thick stack of mail. Most of them were credit card statements. She opened the top envelope, and the bold, red numbers printed on the paper made her stomach twist into tight knots. Her primary credit card was completely maxed out. The itemized charges on the statement weren't for spa days, luxury handbags, or vacations. They were a devastating testament to the reality of the American public education system. $145, $50 at Office Max for printer ink and copy paper, $85 at Walmart for peanut butter crackers and juice boxes. Because half her students came to school with empty stomachs, $120 at Target for 3 winter jackets. Clara traced the numbers with a tired finger. She was drowning in debt. Her rusty 2008 Toyota desperately needed new brake pads, and her own shoes were wearing so thin she could feel the cold pavement through the soles. She had absolutely no money left. But as she sat in the dim light of her kitchen, Clara's mind didn't drift to her own misery. It drifted to a little boy in her class named Leo. Leo was an incredibly bright, quiet 8-year-old boy. He never complained, always finished his homework, and always said please and thank you. But Clara, who possessed the sharp, empathetic eyes of a dedicated teacher, noticed what he tried so desperately to hide. Leo's sneakers were completely falling apart. That morning during recess, Clara had watched Leo trip on the asphalt because the sole of his left shoe had completely detached from the fabric. She saw him sit on the bench, his face flushed with embarrassment, trying to wrap a piece of gray duct tape around the toe of the shoe to hold it together. Clara had assumed, as anyone would, that Leo's family was struggling under the crushing weight of extreme poverty. She didn't know that his father, the quiet man in the flannel shirt who dropped him off, was actually a billionaire actively trying to teach his son the value of humility and resilience. Clara just saw a sweet, innocent boy whose feet were going to freeze when the winter snow arrived. Clara looked at her maxed-out credit card statement. She then looked at a secondary emergency credit card she kept hidden in the back of her wallet, a card she swore she would only use if her car completely broke down. She pulled the emergency card out. Without a second of hesitation, Clara opened her cheap, cracked laptop. She didn't search for a new sweater for herself. She didn't search for car parts. She went straight to a children's shoe website, found a pair of high-quality, insulated winter boots in Leo's size, and clicked Purchase. The total was $65. It was money she absolutely did not have. But as the confirmation screen popped up, Clara took a bite of her instant noodles and smiled. Leo's feet were going to be warm. That was all that mattered. She had no idea that her quiet, invisible sacrifices were about to be violently dragged into the spotlight by the cruelest woman in the school district, setting the stage for a confrontation that would shake the entire community to its core. Thursday evening marked the annual open house at Oak Creek Elementary. The hallways were lined with construction paper turkeys and spelling tests, buzzing with the low murmur of parents meeting the staff. Inside room 2B, Clara Evans had done everything in her power to make her classroom feel like a safe, vibrant haven. She had spent the entire weekend cutting out colorful cardboard letters and hanging cheap string lights around the whiteboard to distract from the peeling paint and water-stained ceiling tiles. There were about 20 parents crammed into the small, mismatched wooden desks. Most were polite, working-class folks listening attentively as Clara stood at the front, explaining the math curriculum for the semester. But sitting in the very front row, taking up an absurd amount of space and radiating absolute disdain, was Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa was dressed in an immaculate midnight blue silk dress, her wrists heavy with platinum bracelets. She had spent the first 10 minutes of Clara's presentation loudly sighing, checking her diamond-encrusted watch, and aggressively whispering to the mother next to her about how the classroom smelled like industrial bleach and cheap crayons. "Excuse me, Miss Evans," Vanessa suddenly interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a serrated knife. She didn't raise her hand, she simply spoke over Clara with absolute entitlement. Clara paused, forcing a polite, professional smile. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling, do you have a question about the reading syllabus?" "I have a question about this entire environment," Vanessa stated, standing up and waving a manicured hand dismissively around the room. "I was looking at the so-called enrichment corner. It's nothing but worn-out paperbacks and plastic bins. It looks like a third-world orphanage. My son is exceptionally gifted. I demand that he be placed in an advanced, private reading cluster, and I want him moved away from the drafty window immediately." A heavy, uncomfortable silence fell over the classroom. The other parents shifted awkwardly in their seats. "Mrs. Sterling," Clara replied softly, her cheeks flushing. "All the children are seated alphabetically to ensure fairness, and I assure you, our reading materials are standard for the district." "The district standards are a joke," Vanessa snapped, stepping closer to Clara's desk, her eyes narrowing with vicious malice. She decided it wasn't enough to insult the classroom. She wanted to publicly destroy the teacher. Vanessa looked Clara up and down, her gaze resting on Clara's faded gray cardigan. "What I really want to know, Miss Evans," Vanessa said, her voice echoing loudly in the silent room, "is where the PTA funds went. The parents in this district raised over $2,000 for classroom enrichment this semester. Yet the room is barren. And looking at you, wearing the exact same shabby, discount-track clothes you wore on Monday, it makes me wonder." Vanessa crossed her arms, delivering the lethal blow. "Are you skimming from the PTA fund to pay your rent, Miss Evans? Because it clearly isn't going toward our children." Several parents gasped out loud. It was a horrific, baseless accusation, designed entirely to humiliate Clara and paint her as a thief. Clara physically recoiled as if she had been slapped across the face. The sheer audacity, the cruel, venomous lie of it all paralyzed her. "Mrs. Sterling, I have never touched the PTA fund. That money goes directly to the principal's office for the computer lab. I would never. Trembling violently, Clara took a step backward, her hip bumping hard against the edge of her wooden desk. The impact knocked her heavy, overstuffed canvas tote bag off the corner of the desk. It hit the linoleum floor with a heavy thud, spilling its contents in front of the entire room. It wasn't stolen cash that fell out. It wasn't luxury makeup. It was a dozen boxes of cheap, store-brand crayons. It was 3 economy-sized jars of peanut butter. And unspooling from the side pocket of the bag was a massive, crinkled, 3-foot-long CVS receipt. The receipt rolled across the floor like a white ribbon, stopping precisely at the tip of Vanessa Sterling's designer heel. Vanessa looked down at the mess with absolute disgust. She didn't bother to read the itemized list printed on the paper, the dozens of entries for granola bars, winter socks, pencils, and the $65 charge for a pair of boys' winter boots. She just saw trash on the floor. Vanessa lifted her foot and stepped firmly onto the long receipt, her sharp heel piercing the paper. "What is this, Miss Evans? Your grocery bill?" Vanessa sneered, her voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. "Are you trying to put on a pathetic act for us? Trying to play the impoverished martyr so we feel sorry for you? Pick up your trash. It's embarrassing." Clara stood frozen, tears of absolute, profound humiliation finally welling up in her eyes. She had starved herself to buy those supplies. She had maxed out her credit cards to keep these children warm. And now, she was being publicly crucified as a thief by a woman who spent more on a single handbag than Clara made in 6 months. Clara slowly bent down to pick up the receipt, entirely defeated by the cruel weight of the world. But before Clara's trembling fingers could touch the paper, a large, calloused hand reached down and grabbed the end of the receipt. "Leave it, Miss Evans," a deep, calm, and terrifyingly steady voice commanded. Clara looked up. Standing right beside her, having quietly walked up from the back of the classroom, was Marcus, the quiet father in the faded flannel shirt and muddy work boots. And as he stood up, gripping the 3-foot-long receipt in his massive hand, the temperature in the room seemed to instantly plummet. Marcus stood up to his full height. He wasn't a small man, and despite the faded flannel and mud-caked boots, the way he held himself commanded an immediate, suffocating gravity in the small classroom. He gently but firmly tugged the crinkled CVS receipt right out from under Vanessa Sterling's designer heel. Vanessa gasped, offended that he dared to touch anything near her. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? Are you the janitor here?" She sneered, looking him up and down with absolute revulsion. "Don't touch me." Marcus didn't even look at her. He held the long receipt up in his calloused hands, his eyes scanning the itemized list of charges. The room was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. 36 boxes of number 2 pencils, Marcus read aloud, his deep voice carrying a profound emotional weight. 40 pairs of thermal winter socks, 12 jars of peanut butter, and 1 pair of insulated boys' winter boots, size 4. Marcus lowered the paper and looked directly at Clara. The coldness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of absolute, overwhelming respect. "Leo wears a size 4. You bought my son winter boots, Miss Evans." Clara wiped a tear from her cheek, nodding nervously. His shoe was taped together. I didn't want him to be cold on the playground. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep." "Oh, for heaven's sake, this is pathetic." Vanessa interrupted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. She turned her venomous glare onto Marcus. "So the teacher is subsidizing your poverty. If you can't afford to put shoes on your own child's feet, you shouldn't have had one. You are a drain on this district, and it's people like you who drag down the property values for the rest of us." Marcus slowly turned his head to look at Vanessa. The terrifying, quiet intensity in his eyes made the arrogant mother instinctively take a half-step backward. I didn't send my son to this public school because I lack funds, Mrs. Sterling, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. I sent him here because I grew up with nothing, and I wanted my son to learn what real struggle and real resilience look like. I wanted him to be surrounded by real people, not plastic, entitled parasites. Vanessa's jaw dropped. Her face turned an ugly shade of crimson. How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who my husband is? He will sue you for harassment. He will ruin you. I know exactly who your husband is, Marcus replied smoothly, entirely unfazed. Gregory Sterling, senior corporate litigator and managing partner at Sterling and Hayes. Vanessa lifted her chin, a desperate, haughty smirk returning to her face. That's right. He is a very powerful man, and you are a nobody in a dirty shirt. Marcus let out a short, humorless chuckle. It was a terrifying sound. My name is Marcus Thorne, he stated, the words dropping into the silent classroom like an anvil. A few parents in the back row gasped. Even Clara's eyes widened in shock. Marcus Thorne wasn't just wealthy. He was the reclusive founder and CEO of Thorne Technologies, one of the largest data infrastructure conglomerates on the planet. He was famously known for his absolute privacy, his ruthless business acumen, and his massive, anonymous philanthropic donations. He was a titan. Vanessa's haughty smirk instantly froze. The blood began to drain from her face as her brain frantically tried to process the name. Thorne. Vanessa stammered, the aggressive fire in her voice instantly dying out. Yes, Marcus stepped forward, entirely invading her personal space, forcing her to look up at him. And what you don't seem to realize, Mrs. Sterling, is that your husband's law firm generated 65% of its total revenue last year from a single, exclusive retainer contract with my holding company. I am his largest client. I am the only reason his firm hasn't gone bankrupt. Marcus looked down at her Hermes bag and then at the diamond rings flashing on her trembling fingers. Your Porsche parked out front, that Birkin bag, those diamonds, Marcus whispered, his voice dripping with absolute terrifying authority. Your husband didn't buy those for you. I did. You are wearing my money. Vanessa began to physically shake. The illusion of her supreme power had just been completely, utterly vaporized by a man wearing muddy boots. And since you believe that financial superiority gives you the right to publicly degrade a woman who is literally starving herself to keep children warm, Marcus said, reaching into the pocket of his flannel shirt and pulling out a sleek, matte black smartphone. I think it's time you experience what real poverty actually feels like. Marcus unlocked the screen. The trap was set, and he was about to blow Vanessa Sterling's perfect, arrogant world straight to hell. Marcus tapped a single contact on his screen and put the phone on speaker. The piercing ring echoed in the dead-silent classroom. It was answered on the second ring by a crisp, professional voice. Thorne Legal, this is David speaking. David, it's Marcus, the billionaire said, never taking his eyes off Vanessa's terrified face. Yes, Mr. Thorne, what do you need? Pull the master retainer agreement for Sterling and Hayes. I want it terminated immediately, effective as of this exact minute. There was a brief pause on the other end, but no hesitation. Understood, sir. We have a standard 30-day exit clause, or we can trigger immediate withdrawal under discretionary review. Which do you prefer? Immediate withdrawal, Marcus commanded, his voice like cracking ice. Pull our entire corporate portfolio off Gregory Sterling's desk by tomorrow morning. Do not pay another invoice. Consider it done, Mr. Thorne. Marcus ended the call and slipped the phone back into his flannel shirt. The silence that followed was absolute. The other parents in the room were staring in stunned disbelief. Vanessa Sterling looked as though the floor had just dropped out from beneath her. Her perfectly manicured hands flew to her mouth. The arrogant, untouchable queen of the PTA was gone, replaced instantly by a hyperventilating, terrified woman. "Number no, Mr. Thorne, please. You can't be serious." Vanessa gasped, her voice cracking into a high-pitched, desperate whine. She took a step toward him, her hands raised in a pathetic, pleading gesture. "It was just a misunderstanding. I was just stressed. Gregory has nothing to do with this." Gregory is about to lose 65% of his firm's billing because his wife couldn't figure out how to be a decent human being, Marcus replied coldly. "You'll bankrupt us." Vanessa shrieked, tears of sheer panic welling up and ruining her expensive mascara. Marcus looked at her with absolutely zero pity. He knew exactly how the fragile illusion of upper-class society worked. "Let's be honest, Mrs. Sterling. People like you don't actually have wealth." "You have leverage," Marcus said, dissecting her entire existence with ruthless precision. "I guarantee that Porsche parked outside is leased. I bet the massive mortgage on your 6-bedroom house is heavily leveraged against Gregory's partnership track. Your entire life is built on high-interest credit cards and the arrogant assumption that my money will keep flowing into your husband's bank account." Vanessa let out a pathetic, choked sob, completely unable to deny it. Her entire fake empire of superiority was crumbling in real time. If Gregory lost the Thorne account, the partners would fire him by Friday. The cars would be repossessed. The house would be foreclosed. The private country club memberships would be revoked. "Please," Vanessa begged, literally clasping her hands together in front of the man in the muddy boots. "I will apologize to Miss Evans. I will buy her new clothes. Just please make the call again. Give Gregory his contract back." Marcus stepped back, completely disgusted by her sudden, spineless groveling. "You spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy a woman who makes $42,000 a year," Marcus stated, his voice ringing with absolute, crushing justice. "You falsely accused her of a felony, embezzling school funds, a charge that could have destroyed her career and put her in prison, simply because you didn't like her sweater. Did you care about bankrupting her?" Vanessa had no answer. She just stood there crying pathetic, ugly tears, her designer silk dress suddenly looking like a clown costume. But Marcus wasn't finished. He hadn't just come to crush a bully. He reached into his pocket and pulled his phone back out. He had one more call to make, and this time he was going to burn Vanessa's entitlement to the ground entirely. Marcus dialed a second number on his matte black smartphone. This time the call didn't go to a sleek corporate office. It went directly to the private cell phone of Dr. Harrison, the superintendent of the entire Oak Creek School District. "Marcus, good evening." The superintendent's voice chirped through the speaker, sounding incredibly eager to please the district's largest, though anonymous, financial benefactor. "What can I do for you?" "Dr. Harrison," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the stunned classroom. "I am currently standing in Miss Evans' third-grade classroom at the open house. I need you to make an immediate administrative adjustment regarding a student named Sterling." Vanessa gasped, her tear-streaked face freezing in absolute horror. "No. Please leave my son out of this. Mrs. Sterling has demanded special enrichment clusters and private accommodations for her son, claiming the standard curriculum and the classroom environment are beneath him," Marcus continued, completely ignoring her pathetic pleas. "I want every single one of those unwarranted, parent-pressured accommodations revoked immediately. As of tomorrow morning, the Sterling boy will be treated exactly like every other student in this district. No special seating, no separate reading groups. If he is genuinely gifted, he will prove it through his grades, not through his mother's financial bullying." "Understood, Mr. Thorne. I will process the adjustment first thing in the morning," Dr. Harrison replied quickly, not daring to question the billionaire. "One more thing," Marcus added, his eyes locked onto Vanessa's trembling figure. I want a district-wide mandate drafted and issued by Friday. Any parent found verbally abusing a teacher or making baseless, defamatory accusations of financial theft against district staff will have their children permanently expelled from Oak Creek. We are running schools, Dr. Harrison, not country clubs for entitled adults. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Marcus. I will handle it personally. Marcus ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Vanessa Sterling was completely, utterly broken. The woman who had marched into the classroom 10 minutes ago like a conquering queen was now hyperventilating, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, her expensive mascara running down her flushed cheeks in dark streaks. Her meticulously crafted armor of wealth and intimidation had been methodically dismantled, piece by piece, until there was absolutely nothing left. She was exposed as exactly what she was, a shallow, cruel woman facing the terrifying ruins of her own leveraged life. She looked frantically around the room, desperate for a single sympathetic face. But the other parents, the working-class mothers and fathers she had looked down upon, the people she had forced to endure her endless, arrogant complaints, were staring back at her in silence. There was no fear in their eyes anymore. There was no deference to her designer clothes. There was only quiet, overwhelming contempt. She had absolutely no power left to wield. Letting out a choked, humiliating sob, Vanessa snatched her pristine white Hermes bag from the desk. She didn't attempt to argue. She didn't say another word. She couldn't. She turned on her designer heel, but there was no pride left in her stride. Pushing past the other parents, she practically sprinted toward the door, fleeing the classroom in absolute, crushing disgrace. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her, sealing her fate. The suffocating, toxic tension that Vanessa had brought into the room instantly vanished with her. The air finally felt clear, as if a heavy storm had finally broken. Marcus let out a slow, steady breath. The terrifying, ruthless titan of industry who had just destroyed a corporate law firm seemed to vanish, replaced once again by the quiet, humble father in the muddy work boots. He slowly turned back to the front of the room. He looked at Clara Evans. The young teacher in the faded gray cardigan was still standing by her desk, completely paralyzed by the sheer, staggering magnitude of what she had just witnessed. Her eyes were wide, brimming with unshed tears of shock, her hands gripping the edge of the wood so tightly her knuckles were white. On the floor between them lay the spilled crayons, the peanut butter, and the crumpled CVS receipt. Marcus stepped forward and gently knelt down to pick up the receipt. The final chapter of Clara's struggle was about to be rewritten. Marcus slowly stood up to his full height, carefully smoothing out the long, crinkled CVS receipt with his calloused hands. He walked over to the teacher's desk and gently placed the boxes of crayons and the jars of peanut butter back onto the wooden surface. "Miss Evans," Marcus spoke, the cold, ruthless edge he had weaponized against Vanessa completely gone. It was replaced by a profound, radiant warmth and deep respect. 30 years ago, there was a little boy who was an orphan. He was starving, and he came to school every single day with an empty stomach. That boy would have undoubtedly dropped out and ended up in a prison cell if it hadn't been for a teacher. A woman who wore frayed cardigans exactly like yours, who secretly left a loaf of bread in his desk every day, and bought him a winter coat when the snow began to fall. Marcus's eyes grew glassy with emotion. He looked directly into Clara's exhausted eyes. "That teacher saved my life, and today I get to witness you draining the very last of your meager salary, taking on crushing credit card debt just to keep my son's feet warm. Your kindness is the greatest asset in this entire building." Clara brought her trembling hands to her tear-streaked face. All the exhaustion, the bitter instant noodle dinners, and the profound humiliation she had just endured finally broke, releasing in a heavy wave of overwhelming emotion. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his flannel jacket and pulled out a leather-bound checkbook and a fountain pen. With a few decisive strokes, he wrote out a number, tore the check from the binding, and gently pressed it into Clara's trembling palm. Clara looked down. The number written on the heavy paper was $50,000. "Mr. Thorne, no, I can't accept this much money." Clara stammered, frantically trying to hand it back. Leo's boots were only $65. "That isn't for the boots, Miss Evans," Marcus interrupted gently, closing her fingers around the check. "That is to entirely wipe out the crushing credit card debt you took on to subsidize this district's failures, and the remainder is for you to buy a brand new car. Your Toyota has failing brakes, and a great educator like you deserves a safe ride to school every morning." Clara let out a choked sob, tears of absolute liberation streaming down her cheeks. Marcus turned around, casting his gaze over the parents standing in stunned silence. His aura as a tech billionaire shone brighter than ever, not through designer brands but through the staggering power of his compassion. "And I am announcing to everyone here," Marcus declared, his voice echoing with undeniable authority. "At 8:00 a.m. tomorrow morning, the Thorne Education Foundation will officially wire $5 million into the Oak Creek School District accounts. This endowment will be legally chartered as the Clara Evans Teacher Support Fund. Starting tomorrow, not a single teacher in this district will ever have to spend a dime of their own paycheck to buy pencils, books, or winter coats for their students. The heaters will be fixed. The library will be filled." The classroom sat in absolute silence for 2 entire seconds. Then, a father in the back row began to clap. Then the mother next to him. And suddenly, the entire room erupted into a deafening roar of applause, cheers, and tears of profound gratitude. The working-class parents surged forward, surrounding Clara, pulling the young, crying teacher into a massive, emotional embrace. Marcus smiled, slowly stepping back from the crowd. He quietly pulled his worn baseball cap back onto his head, turned around, and slipped out the classroom door, disappearing into the dim hallway, returning to his life as a quiet father in a faded flannel shirt. We live in a society where a person's value is too often falsely measured by designer handbags and luxury cars. Material shells create an illusion of power, but they can never buy respect. The true heroes of our world do not wear capes. They wear frayed cardigans, eat cheap dinners, and quietly use their own hearts to keep the next generation warm. Arrogance and entitlement will always be crushed when forced to face the absolute, unyielding power of empathy. Cherish the teachers who silently sacrifice every single day, because they are the ones keeping this world from falling into the dark. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.